Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I am very excited. Mark, do you want to come in? Come on in. Please stand with us. We just took a tour and ride down over the property here at Beacon Yards, all the way into and under the throat, the viaduct that communities here have been advocating for decades to try to address and remedy. And we are standing on the brink of having a path forward for that. So I'm incredibly grateful on behalf of the city and so many of the community members to be jointly applying with the state, with MassDOT, for federal funding to move this project forward. A lot of work has gone into this to ensure that we are building an accessible, vibrant, new neighborhood that's connected by transit to everything the city of Boston has to offer. This will create jobs for decades and generations to come. It will create cleaner air, healthier communities, and an incredible amount of opportunity that is grounded on what we do right now today. So I'm excited to be here with my colleagues. I'll let everyone quickly introduce themselves and say a bit about what we saw or any major takeaways from that. So I'll start with my fellow elected officials. I'll start with Senator Will Brownsberger, who will be followed by State Rep Mike Moran, State Rep Kevin Honan, and then City Councilor Liz Braden.
The main takeaway when you walk down here is this is just a huge site. It's a huge opportunity to improve the city. And the other big takeaway is it has to get done. That viaduct's in rough shape when you look at it from underneath. We all look forward to trying to make it work in the way that's best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Secretary Tesla, who was here. Thank him for the work that they've done. And I want to thank all of our colleagues and friends in the community who have done work on this for 8 years now. This is very exciting on how we're thinking about this project. This project is doing transportation first, development second. And I think that's going to speak loudly about the results in the end of the day. When you have transportation done in the beginning, the opportunities for development become so much greater, and the abilities to make those projects sustainable, long-term, are much greater. So I'm thrilled that the mayor has stepped forward with the state and to apply for this $1 billion, and hopefully we can do a groundbreaking before we all leave office.
Thank you. My name's Kevin Honan, State Rep here from Allston-Brighton. I want to thank you, Mayor, for putting this together for us to visit the site along with Secretary Tesla and the state officials. It's great to see so many of my friends and neighbors from Allston-Brighton here. It's a critically important project for our neighborhood and our city. As you can see, there's a vast amount of land here, and Boston doesn't have that much open space to do development and housing and to straighten out these transportation projects. Clearly, our concerns here are environmental and efficiency. We want to make sure the surrounding community is protected during this straightening out of the turnpike. But it's a project that could be wonderful for our city, and it's been a pleasure for me to work with my elected officials and the direct abutters, community residents, to make sure our neighborhood is protected throughout this project. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Liz Braden. I'm the District Councillor for District 9, Allston-Brighton. I was really privileged to be here this morning and take the tour and see the site. And this grant opportunity that we have with federal investment is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really improve transit for this emerging neighbourhood. This vast expanse of land here is ripe for development, but it only will work if we have really good transportation infrastructure. So this is a vitally important work that we have to do, and I'm really hopeful that we can all work together to make it a success. Thank you.
So I'll bring up our technical expertise and really the power behind all the effort that's gone in on the city side to working with the state collaboratively to get this application in and to set a vision and plans. Our Chief of Streets, Yasha Franklin Hodge, and then we'll hear from our community members.
Thanks, Mayor. Hi, everybody. Yasha Franklin Hodge. So just taking this tour and kind of reflecting on the space, I think the thing that stands out for me is what an incredible opportunity we have to build connections in this location. You know, this is the this site borders parts of the Allston community. We have residential neighborhoods right alongside the site. We have the Charles River, we have BU, we have Harvard, and yet all of these things are just completely disconnected from one another and impenetrable because of the infrastructure that's here. So the chance to plan this with an eye towards stitching the Allston neighborhood back together, towards removing some of the barriers that the infrastructure has placed, really opening up connectivity to the river, creating pathways for people on foot and on bike to get where they need to go, and to build a signature transit station here that can really serve as a gateway for people coming from the west, from other parts of Boston, and connecting to places as far as Kendall and the Longwood Medical area. This is just such an incredible opportunity. It's going to be a very long road. There's a lot to build. There's a lot of funding that needs to be finalized, but we are incredibly excited to have the chance to help shape this project and really make it something that Boston will be proud of for generations. So really excited to be part of it. Thanks.
And as I shared on the tour earlier, the folks I've learned the most from about this project and the legacy and the potential are our neighborhood and community advocates and leaders. So I'll bring up Cindy Rodriguez, the chair of the Harvard Allston Task Force, followed by Tony Disidoro. I'm not sure what hat Tony's wearing today, but Tony's in charge of everything that happens in Allston-Brighton. He's the hub of information. And then Fred Salvucci, resident, grew up here, and of course the former Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth.
Hi, Cindy Marchando. I am the chair of the Harvard Allston Task Force. It's an honor to be here with you, Mayor Wu and Secretary Tesler. Thank you for inviting us. You know, we heard a lot about the takeaways. I share the same sentiments with everyone, but one of the true takeaways that I have is that there's engaging in the community, getting community feedback, making sure that the impact of the residents who've lived here for years were all taken into consideration, and also ensuring that we are all together as a team working for this new development. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Disidoro. I'm president of the Allston Civic Association. I've also had the honor of being an original member of the Allston I-90 Multimodal Project Task Force. As other speakers have said, we've been at this for a little bit, but I want to extend my appreciation to Mayor Wu and to Secretary Tesler for continuing to appreciate the importance of local community input into this process. This indeed is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, not only for the region and the city, but most importantly for the local residents of Allston-Brighton. I am extremely optimistic, given the growing support across the board for this very important project. As Senator Brownsburg was saying, you have to appreciate how massive a project this will be, and I think the proportional impact to this region will be the same. And I'm looking forward to continuing the work, to continuing the dialogue, and I'm looking forward to the day when we truly significantly impact this region for generations to come.
Hi, I'm Jessica Robertson. I'm a resident here in Allston, and I've been a member of the task force, the Allston I-90 task force, since it was founded almost a decade ago. And we have come a long way in that time, but there's still a lot more to figure out. And so it's really wonderful to have the Wu administration and Mayor Wu herself providing such strong leadership on this project. It really is crucial to have that vision for what this project could do and the transformation that it could bring, to make sure that we don't just get bogged down in the weeds of engineering. So thank you to Mayor Wu and Yasha and everyone else that's been working so hard on this.
Well, I would just say, add to what Jessica just said. This has been a team effort by lots of people for over a decade. I think I'm sure the first person I heard speaking publicly about the need for connectivity was Representative Honan, the very first comment at the very first meeting. And Mayor Wu has just injected new energy by getting together with Secretary Tesla to apply for the federal money to make this impossible dream possible. The aspirations of all of us are really on the same page. It's now about getting it moving, and Secretary Tesla and especially Mayor Wu took the essential step last week by getting an application for federal funding in on time. It's a long road ahead, but we're in a good position. I just want to thank the mayor and thank Secretary Tesla.
Questions?
Can you talk a little bit about where you're at with deciding how much the city is going to contribute? I guess it's now the total everything is around $2 billion. I don't know if you have a number yet, or if you want to talk about where the status of the talks are.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So, as part of the grant application, the federal grant application that the city just submitted jointly with MassDOT, there's a commitment in there to ongoing discussions between the city, the state, and Harvard about how to fund various elements of the infrastructure. Ultimately, the city is looking at the local streets that would be created as part of this project as something that we would potentially participate in financially, either directly or through the development process to help fund. The exact scope of those costs, the dollar amounts, and even which project elements will sort of be determined to be local streets by the Federal Highway Review of the project are still to be determined. So it's an ongoing conversation. Ultimately, this is largely a highway and a rail project, and we expect the state and the federal government to pick up the lion's share of the cost of that. But where there are city-focused elements, the city may participate.
When you say development capture, you say development, you mean like value capture, or say additional property taxes paying for?
We're not at the point where we're looking at specific financing mechanisms yet, but thinking about it's common for the city when there are large-scale development projects to have developers in some cases actually participate in construction of elements of the transportation infrastructure that are adjacent to the properties. So really there's a lot of work ahead around planning for how this area would get developed and built, making sure that it's done in a way that prioritizes things like affordable housing, open space, community benefits. That's a process that starts with true planning, not with a development proposal, but with a conversation with community members. I think from there, as we start to see how the land use might take shape, there's going to be opportunities to have conversations with development partners about if and how they could participate financially in some of the construction costs. Of course, we expect if we are building acres of new city neighborhood that will generate substantial new property tax, but the first and foremost our concern is on making sure that the planning gets done well with the community at the table so that the outcomes are things that the neighborhood of Allston is excited to have.
As far as the city contributions.
And can I add one point? I just want to recognize also Mark Hanley is here representing Harvard, and I'm grateful Harvard has been at the table with us. We're working on a lot of things together and a lot of different angles, and so it is all interconnected, and we want to make sure, and I know that all of the colleagues here and institutional partners all share a desire to make sure that this isn't just an opening up of new land for development, but really an investment in a livable, equitable, resilient new neighborhood and connections to every part of our city and Commonwealth. And so affordability in terms of the housing that's created here, mobility, access to educational opportunity, that is all connected and tied into the planning, as the chief said. Sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, as far as the estimated city contribution, is there at least a range you're looking at as a possibility?
We're not at this point. I mean, I think it really is going to come down to some design decisions that haven't yet been made. We're expecting to see a notice of project change as part of the permitting process filed by MassDOT later this year, and that's going to help to clarify some of the specific project scope elements. Timeline is going to be a factor in cost, though. There's a lot of inflation right now everywhere, but especially in construction. So it's just a lot of moving parts right now, but we're working very closely with MassDOT as the project evolves and the specifics become clearer to figure out what the city's role might be financially.
And what's your understanding of the grant application timeline?
Yeah, so this is the first round of the new mega grant application program. This is the first time this program has been made available. We are competing with projects from across the country. The applications went in on the 23rd of last month. We are looking at a announcement timeline coming later this year, probably into the fall. We don't know whether we will, we're certainly hopeful we'll be successful in getting the full grant amount that we applied for, but there's also a possibility that we may find this project partially funded. There will be future rounds of this program and others, and so this is really the first step in a funding process. There's also a substantial amount of funding that will come at the state level. Some of that is secured, some of that still requires additional discussion. So this is it's an important step. It helped define and clarify some of the critical project elements that the city has been pushing for, but there's going to be more rounds of conversation to get to the point where it's a fully funded project.
Can you talk about...
I just want to say on this point, there is no question whether this will happen. All of the parties are here at the table. We are all excited about the possibilities and the vision that this represents. The question is when and how the funding streams come together. And so federal funding would be a huge burst for us in accelerating this, but we understand that there are many other communities across the country who feel the same way with many deserving projects. And so for us to be at this point with the city and the state coordinating together on a major application of this size is pretty remarkable. We're very, very grateful and proud of all the work that's gone into this point, and eagerly awaiting the word back in a couple months. But no matter what, often the process of getting federal funding requires just keeping at it, and the earlier we could get this whole package together and the whole application and all the details in, it will also likely and potentially improve our chances for future rounds as well.
Jay, can you talk about where things stand with the ERC, which is sort of one of the pieces, even though it's not here, it's sort of the first move of Harvard in this direction on the other side of Western Ave?
Yeah, it's all interconnected. As you say, it's separate from this particular grant application, but the transit opportunities will definitely open up what it means for property and land use all along this corridor. So we continue to be in conversations with Harvard and most importantly with our community about what we need to see, whether that's moving forward on a piece of it with more stringent requirements around affordability and open space and other essential community needs, but also getting a clearer sense of what comes after that and how the entire parcel could be used.
Mayor, what's a reasonable minimum component of housing that should take up a big parcel like this?
You mean in terms of affordability, or how much housing?
Number of units or percentage of housing is the overall component of the development?
Yeah. The key to our economic recovery has to be housing affordability and stability for our residents. It is the number one fear that we hear neighborhood by neighborhood about just how much the pressure is rising and costs are going up. It's also the number one concern that I hear from employers across the city as they are struggling in some cases to be able to keep employees here because of housing costs. And so transportation is directly connected to that in terms of which housing is accessible and can be connected to our job centers. But we know that there are very, very few opportunities like this. It is so precious that in a city that is historic and already pretty developed, like the city of Boston, land constrained, to open up an entirely new neighborhood, there's nothing like it. And so we're proceeding very intentionally with all the partners here to ensure that the livability and affordability will be a key component of what happens here.
So on that note, considering nearby Allston Yards committed, what, 20% or so, do you foresee a similar, would you like to see a similar commitment, or would this be an opportunity to push for higher levels of affordable housing for, whatever ends up being here?
We're continuing to be in conversations about what's going to happen immediately, but also to do our part to make sure that in this moment now, we're also laying the foundation for what will happen decades into the future with commitments. Affordability is critical to everything that we're doing across the city. And so, as I've been trying to tout whenever I have space, we need Boston to be the greenest city in America, a city for everyone where families can thrive. That means affordability, that means a commitment to climate resiliency, and a focus on our young people and becoming that city of the future.
Last question. And also, could one of you speak to what outlook there is on addressing environmental concerns? I think it was the Watershed Association that mentioned concerns about the multimodal proposal disrupting or potentially disrupting the ecosystem along the river.
What was most striking to me, and I'll pass it over to all my colleagues too, when you're standing right at the throat, under the viaduct, it is a matter of inches, as Councilor Brighton is saying, on either side of how we're going to fit all of the many needs for the tracks and rail access, for the commuters, for cycling and transit and pedestrian access as well. And so I know this has been a very complex engineering conversation even to start, and that has required a tremendous amount of community engagement from all of the groups that are involved. And so our climate partners are the leading light in Boston, and we've been working very closely, so very grateful for everyone who's been helping us figure out exactly where those inches will come from to accommodate all of the mobility needs here. And the priority is also ensuring that we protect what we have now in the Charles River and that there will be no damage whatsoever. But to ensure that balance and integration of all the needs will prioritize and accelerate the community benefits, including the paths that will be available to neighborhood residents and visitors on that edge. Anyone want to add to the climate side conversation? Come on, Jessica.
So one of the biggest issues that has been written about a lot in the press is what to do with the narrow throat section, and there were multiple different options that would have had different types of impacts on the river. The one that MassDOT has selected is that many in the community and the mayor have all supported, is the at-grade option where everything is flat on the ground. The difficulty with that option is that it's a very tight amount of space, and so we are fighting over things like the width of shoulders on the highway in order to make sure that we can fit everything without encroaching on the river. The Charles River Watershed Association and the Charles River Conservancy have been great partners and members of the task force throughout, and it's really important to have them watchdogging what happens with the river. But I think that this project can be a great opportunity to improve the condition of the river. So right now, if you go out to that section of the pathway, it's incredibly narrow, and there's this short slope down to the water that's just sort of overgrown with weeds. And so this project really gives us an opportunity to improve the experience of that parkland, which is owned by DCR, for pedestrians and cyclists, and also to improve the ecology and the habitat of the river at the same time. That's a piece that many in the community and on the task force and the other organizations have been pushing for all along. It's difficult to have those conversations sometimes in the context of a highway engineering project, where those elements are considered mitigation. You talk about them afterwards, but I think it's really important that we all keep those parts of the conversation in the forefront throughout. And I think the beauty of this new grant program from the federal government is that it is asking about environmental benefits and community benefits, and that makes a project more competitive. And so we hope to continue raising the priority and the focus on those elements of the project, and I hope that will actually make it easier for us to get this project funded and built, even though it's sometimes out of the normal way of doing things for an agency like MassDOT.
I think one other important point to make is that this project will help reconnect the neighbourhood to the river. The highway was built through the neighbourhood, demolishing streets and cutting the neighbourhood off from the access to the green space in the river. And this project will the new multimodal connections across the river will greatly improve that. The other thing to consider is that if we improve our mass transit options in this corridor, with increased rail connection, etc., that we will actually be able to hopefully decrease the number of cars that are needed to come into the city, and that we will be able to reduce our carbon emissions in that process as well. So this is a critically important project from many angles, but the environmental one is always front and centre in any conversation. Thank you.
Thank you all.